Hey, back again with the K 1980s plywoodish Les Paul style copy. And Patrick from Germany was asking the other day whether this was whether there's any wood between the neck and the pickup, and there's your answer. No, there isn't. It goes straight from neck to pickup case and pickup, and also you can see right down in the side of. Hey, back again, conked out on the battery there. Yes, so what I'm hoping to do is put this back together again in pretty much original condition. So what I just want to have a look at now is what I need to do to make these frets playable, and something a sort of close-up look. It's sort of hard for you to see, but they're kind of funny, these frets. Not the greatest light in the world coming from anything, but they all sort of stop a bit short of the binding, like they've been pinched off in some sort of way. Not the tidiest looking thing ever. But I think there's enough life in them to... I could be really naughty and just refret the thing. Ooh, how about that? I could give it stainless steel frets for a laugh. Because I've somehow ended up with a set of stainless steel frets. Don't know why. Wouldn't that be funny? Oh no, these aren't stainless steel. Which one's stainless steel? Not those, not those. Neither of these. Stainless is somewhere else. Oh well, here they are. Now I'm going to have to be careful I don't lose those. There we are, stainless. 7.25 radius, that's not going to be much use, is it? Oops. Actually, how far off is it? Yeah, it is a bit. Do they bend at all, these stainless? Oh, they do a bit. Yeah, we can get that to work. Nobody would notice. Imagine that. Do we really want to go through all that hassle? You know, I don't think we do. It's fun at the time. Let's just let's get it prepped up like the good old days, so we can level it. Because there is enough on there to do it. It won't be brilliant, but it will work. So it's time to get the old masking tape out and do the trick. Seems like a very boring thing to be doing after installing new frets, but it's still the bit that will make this play well. I'm also interested with this K. It's got the cheapest, nastiest tuners in the world. No, that's the Fender. Yeah, the K tuners are these things, and they are really naff. But if I'm going to be true to the form, I'm going to have to put them back on here and not replace them. I guess unless it's just totally useless. But what I'm going to do, what I want to do with this guitar is, instead of just assume it's useless, which everybody does, and by the way I did when I was a kid in the late 1970s, but instead of taking it for granted that it's useless, I'm going to put right the bits that I know need putting right to make it playable, which is the neck, the action, and wiring, getting the wiring actually working. But once I've done those things, then what I'd like to do is kind of flush out of my mind the prejudice about it, you know, the idea that it's just automatically crap because it's, you know, it must be crap because it's a K. And now, you know, it's a shame. I like this idea that there's something good in all guitars. Just the very fact that you can play them. You know, it seems like, I don't know, at some point in the 70s and 80s we went from, I don't know, the Beatles days when, you know, they would have been playing almost anything they could get their hands on. Out in the days of Quarrymen and playing as the Beatles in Hamburg in those earliest years, but you know, they didn't have quality instruments. They were ropey things, and they weren't. None of them would have been at the time much better than this K. And nobody had a big. Well, we don't know, but it didn't seem like there was such a big deal about quality, and everyone wasn't an expert in quality, and there weren't raging debates in the internet, of course, all about, you know, which tone wood does this and which bolt-on neck is better than which glued neck, or vice versa. So I'd like to sort of proceed with this guitar from the point of view that, let's assume that because it's a guitar, it's brilliant. Let's make it solid and playable. Make sure it's not shooting sparks and cutting the ends of things off, because it's all completely dangerous. But apart from that, let's just make it play, and let's make it fun to play. And if the sound is really horrible, then so be it. We'll I don't know, do something to the pickups. But I really want to have a bit more of an open mind, or to just try and drop some of those certainties about what's good and what isn't. You know, because one thing will be crap on one day through one amp because you're in a certain situation, or it's a certain day of the week, or you've been thinking about a certain thing, and then another day that same thing through a really terrible amp will suddenly be great, and it'll be the best, you had the most fun you ever had because you were feeling good about something, or the sun was shining, or you felt excited about some new career opportunity, or whatever else it was. But you know, I mean, I played this OK in work when I first got it, and because it was so crap and dirty and stinking, I played it as if I was C6 Steve for a bit, and kind of gave myself permission just not to have a judgment about how good or bad it was, but just to play it and just have a bit of fun. And I really enjoyed that. Didn't matter how bad it was, I just twanged it and got on with it. So I'm going to treat this with the same sort of kind of love and attention as I would do for anything else. Just let me lower this, hold on a sec. Stand by for a bit of waggling. Oh God, this mic stand is so hard. Right, you probably can see all right there. Yeah, so I'm gonna do it as if it was a decent guitar, which I know for a fact that if I'd had this on my 6th birthday, it certainly would have been awesome, even though we didn't know that word then. Well, that'll have to do. So there's no quick way of doing this. It's funny because I sold a guitar last week, the Gibson Baldwin Les Paul copy thing. I don't know if it's, I don't quite know too much about the guitar, other than it's some sort of a partnership between Gibson and an educational provider called Baldwin, and it's something about presumably providing a cheap guitar for education purposes. But suffice to say, anyone who knows anything about guitars hates it and thinks it's a piece of crap. And the really scathing reviews said that it was rubbish because it sounded awful, and it was an abomination. Gibson should never have done it, and yeah, and all that stuff. Sounded awful, frets were terrible. I had to spend hours sorting the frets out and whatnot. And so, of course, I got it and did the usual to it. And afterwards, I thought, actually, this is a really nice playing, easy to play, kind of very benign, pleasant guitar. And I looked at the criticism and thought, it's quite funny that the fact that the person hated it because it took so much time to do the frets is absolutely no different from any of the guitars that have come through the Real Love Guitars workshop. So, to me, I absolutely expect them to need all their frets leveling, because I know that it's never done. So it's not, the fact that the frets need leveling is not really, for me, a criteria or a measure for it being good or bad. It's only as good or bad as a custom shop Fender that comes through needing its frets 60% or more of its frets leveling. So I kind of threw that criticism out, but the thing sold within a couple of hours of putting it on eBay to a guy who said he'd seen it on another one of my videos and sort of had hoped there and then when he saw it that it would come up for sale at some point. So he obviously liked the look of it, and he bought it for his son. So, the fact that it's got quite a slim-ish, slim neck and feels very nice to play and has a nice action for a learner, kind of seems to me that it's a pretty good guitar doing exactly what it sets out to do. But it's that thing about, for some reason, according to other people's marker or mark of what's good and what's bad, it's judged as bad, and then it becomes very popular and cool to just judge it as bad. And that's what the same really applies to these Ks and the satellites. I mean, they're not brilliantly made. They're made with cheap plywood, mass-produced in factories where nobody gave too much hoots about the quality or the luxury, fitting out the thing with deluxe components, I should say. But they're guitars, and I remember back to playing my first ever gig on a satellite guitar. And in a way, how priceless is that? It's all about the experience that you had with it, not how fantastic a guitar it was. Those are sort of empty things when it all comes down to it. It's what you did with it and what you experienced that matters. And I think when we get older and a bit more disposable cash sometimes, I really think we forget that. We get tied up in this thing about chasing after what's supposed to be the best, and then I think we get tied up in the dialogue, the discussion about it. We've always got an opinion about the best this, and this is better than that, and I don't know, maybe it's a boy thing particularly, because we grew up playing top trumps in school and all that stupidness about my stealth fighter's got more invisibility points than yours, and mine's got more speed, and mine can go to a higher operational ceiling and all that malarkey. Still, the point is, this is a guitar. It's still fun to play, however much it cost and however crap it was. And I'd much rather see people get this and play it and have fun with it, because I've made it into a playable guitar, or more playable guitar, than to see somebody just ignore it or chuck it in the skip. Right, I'm just cutting an extra bit of tape in case I need it for later on, and then I'm going to start the fret leveling process. And if this is the first of my videos you've seen, then I'll be going through the various stages of the fret leveling. And if you've seen other of my videos, this will be very boring, because I've done this so many times before. I don't mind doing it. For me, it's always a pleasure to see something better coming out of something that was old and tired, but you might find it dreary if you've seen it more than once. Anyway, so the fret leveling process comprises 3 stages. The first stage is to level the frets. The second stage is to reprofile the frets, which means to turn them back into fret-shaped things, because when we level them, we make them flat. And then the final stage of 3 is the polishing process, where we take great care to polish the frets up to a high shine and playability. And now for me, for my purposes, although you don't need to do this, but for my purposes I'm going to check what percentage of the frets on this neck are... Oh, Dave, I've done it again, I forgot to put the masking tape on. Dull. Anyway, yeah, so to check what percentage of the frets on this guitar are uneven, and to do that I want to start with a fairly straight neck, and this hasn't got one. This has got a bowed neck, sort of humped neck, if you like. So I need to turn this truss rod counterclockwise with the right size thing. Wow, surely it's not that big. It is. Okay, turn counterclockwise, see if it has any immediate effect. Not a lot. Oh, a bit, maybe, yeah. Yeah, so the idea is we're going to start with a level neck. And then we're going to, once we've got a level neck, then I'm going to check and see how many of the frets are level relative to each other. And you have to remember this is only ever relative to each other. There's no real high or low in this game. The frets are uneven just in relation to each other. So if we find a fret that appears to be high, it may be that that fret's high, or it could be that the one next to it is low, in which case it will still give the same kind of reading. So it doesn't really matter which of those things it is. What matters is that we make them all level relative to each other. And somebody asked a question on one of these videos the other day, and said, you know, he noticed that I did all the frets, which then meant, if having levelled all the frets, then it meant that I had to then crown or reprofile all of them using this tool here. Wouldn't it be simpler, he said, just to do 1 or 2 frets, whichever are high? And I agree with that. The only problem with that is that, as I explained to him, quoting the numbers, I've never come across, first of all, there's never been a guitar out of 70, not one single guitar had no uneven frets. Only one guitar had around 25%, a quarter of the frets were uneven. There was none lower than that, and more than 75% of all those guitars had 70% or more uneven frets. So the idea is, yes, if we found a guitar with just one uneven fret out of all of them, then yes, it would make sense to just take care of that one and not have to rework everything else. Mind you, in doing that you would miss the opportunity as well to take out the nicks and chips and string grooves and whatever else might be worn out on your strings. But it's still a good argument to say, well, if you only found one uneven fret, you might just take care of that one. But you can see the numbers say that that's just never happened, and it's unlikely to happen, since 100% of these guitars that come through here have uneven frets. What I can tell you as well is that this guitar doesn't flatten out, so I'm going to have to do it as is. It's nearly flat, but it's not absolutely completely flat. But there's no more kind of pull in the truss rod. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a relative level check with this fret rocker. And if and where I find a bit of unevenness, I'll just mark it with a pencil. And move on. It's already quite surprising how little unevenness there is between these, relatively speaking. Oh, there we go. That's better. That's quite substantially uneven. And it's all the way across, but it's pretty high on one side. What will happen is that when we come to level that, you'll see that the fret leveling file will take off a hell of a lot of material around that edge on that point where it's so high. Wow. Let's get all the way across. Okay, so this has come back into the good old high scoring uneven frets. But again, it's not massively unusual, even though it's the cheapest, nastiest guitar in this workshop by miles. But what I would say about these frets is where they are uneven, they are quite substantially uneven. Some guitars have a fair number of uneven frets, but they're not extreme. This is quite extreme. Well, they're quite severe. This actually, having said that now, this may score 100% or 95% nearly. Having said it started out well, I take it all back. Now if you were going to level your own frets, you wouldn't need to do this measuring, checking part. I'm doing it just for curiosity's sake, and to be able to put this critter onto the leaderboard of shame. And I think it's going to occupy a fairly low spot. 22 frets, of which we can only measure 20, so out of 20 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Well, a good resounding 90%. Joint bottom with the vintage cherry, vintage SG cherry. I feel moved to make a special entry into the book for this creature. It deserves a place on the leaderboard of shame. What time is it now? 9:45. Right, just got a quick note on here. So don't like this marker pen. It's not the one I want to be using. K. Les Paul. Copy. A big juicy 90%. Hurrah! So I guess you could say that that 90%, you can't see it, but I'm just putting this at the bottom of the leaderboard with that crappy vintage SG, which must have been a one-off because they're not usually as bad as that, the vintage SGs, but this one was. Okay, so you know, we have a horrible guitar from the 70s with not only uneven frets but with substantially uneven frets. So they are, where they are uneven, they are kind of significantly uneven. So you know, what I would know that a guitar from this age, that period of time, you know, really badly or cheaply, quickly manufactured and certainly not set up in any way. And so that the significant or quite extreme unevenness of these frets would have been exactly what set your playing action when you were a kid and you had one of these. So you remember it having an action sort of about a mile high at the 12th fret and made it just miserable to play, and that was because underneath it you had 20 frets at least, or 18 frets in this case, that were as uneven as these have proven to be. And so once we take that away, which I'm about to do now with the fret leveling file, really there's no reason why this guitar shouldn't be easy to play. Okay, there goes the nut. That's fine. Who needs it anyway? So just taking a quick look in the reflected light, and we can see that the spots that we thought would take down material fastest because they were the highest have done that. And some of the places where it looked like the frets were high on one side actually turn out to be uneven because one or two of these frets are quite low, and you tell they're low because the file here has taken none of the metal away, so they're kind of like the fret itself is in a ditch or a trench, and the file isn't touching it. So that's what I meant by earlier on about the relative unevenness. So I'm just going to brush this clean for a minute, and then another quick look. With a guitar as old as this, unless we're prepared to refret it, which of course we can do if we had to, just got to be careful, because although we've got to take everything down to get to the low spots, because otherwise it still won't play any good if we can't get everything even. And if getting it even means getting down to the low spots, then we have to do that. But if doing that means we lose all the metal on the frets and it renders it unplayable, then that's that's the price we have to pay. That truss rod is loose, not good. But we have to get it level, otherwise we're stuck with a crappy action that will never be any good. So I just keep going, making sure I'm taking an even amount off, following the kind of radius or the curve of the fingerboard, and then just take another look and see what we've got to and what we haven't got to. Well, we've covered most of it. There's still a couple of frets that are substantially lower than everything else, which I can't really account for why that is, but we'll turn it around and we'll give it one more go, and then I suspect it will be time to reconsider the workability of these frets, or the viability of them. And that's always a serious consideration. You have to admit to yourself at some point that if you're not going to be able to do this, then it's not going to work. So we've taken loads of material off some of these frets, and then if I check my level here, I've still got rattling, a little bit of rattling, because this one here is relatively untouched, and that tells us that is of all the frets on this whole neck, this one is the lowest. Why that should be, and why it would be as pronounced a difference as all the other ones, I have no idea. I can try and do a bit more at this end and try and, if you like, dig it out of the trench, but to be honest, if it's not coming, if we can't get to it, we're not getting to it, and we'll still get the relative unevenness. Well, it's a tiny bit, but I think I'm going to live with that. If we're lucky enough to be able to make this work at all. Looking now down at the other ones, they're kind of going to soon run out, but it'll be a lot better than it was. So next stage, okay, we've done stage one. That is leveled. If you want to, if you had some particularly dark marks on here which represented significantly uneven parts, go back to them and just check them again, and you see that bar the ones we couldn't actually get to, the majority of them, the vast majority of them will have been fixed by this leveling process. So part two is the reprofiling, and that means we get the marker pen and we go back over the top of all of these freshly flattened frets, and this time the marker pen is going to do a similar job. Last time it showed us where we hadn't touched it with the file. This time it's going to do the same thing, but we're going to watch the marker pen for a different reason. This time we want to use the fret crowning file to take away the flat spot on the top of these frets, and the way that the file is built is it's a concave shape, and it will, as a concave shape, it will go over the top of the fret and it will take away the sharp edges of the newly flattened fret, and it will take those away until it's reshaped it to a nice curve. But if we monitor the marker pen on the top of this fret and we just stop before we remove all of it, so we leave a thin little strip down the middle, then we know that that part of the fret is untouched. And if we leave it untouched, we also know then that all of the fret tops are still level. Okay, it's only if we take that away and we start taking more metal away that we'll create unevenness again. So I'm going to use the medium setting on this file, and it's quite simple to use. We just run it across the top, and in the light I can see two strips of shiny metal appear where it's taking off the square shoulders, and it kind of, as it goes down, it comes inwards, leaving a thinner and thinner strip of black marker pen down the middle. And I'm all the time watching that strip of marker, and as soon as it gets when it gets as thin as I can possibly get it, I stop and move on to the next fret. So here the light is very useful to monitor your progress. These frets aren't, at this age of this guitar and this amount of unevenness that we had to take so much metal away, these frets are never going to be perfect again. But they, I think, judging by what we've got here, I think they will be playable, and I think they will certainly be level, which will be the big sort of difference from before. Yeah, that's okay. What you'll find is, if you're using this tool, when you get to this point where you've taken a really large amount of metal from a really high fret, it'll take longer to wear this down into a nice shape again, because you've got a lot of work to do. Particularly that's that one and a couple of these up here. You just got to be patient, and this file is a diamond coated file, so it does do the job pretty effectively. And when you've got a lot of flat surface to remove, you just got to trust the file to just keep on going, and it will eventually take it all away. There's a chance, this is where if you have basically taken down too much metal and there's not enough left to complete the job, you'll notice, because this is where you'll run out of downward travel, and you actually can't get any, you can't wear away any more of it, and your little black line doesn't get any thinner, and then you have a fairly good idea that you've hit. Basically the edges of this concave file are touching the masking tape, and there's an air gap between that and the top, so you can't take any more away without wearing down into the wood. But we haven't reached there yet, so it's all looking alright so far. So about 50 guitars ago, I started asking the question, which is why isn't this work done? Why has every guitar I've ever touched so far, back then maybe 20 guitars in, 20 out of 20 seemed a pretty convincing number to say, well, to convince me that there was something interesting about the fact that all guitars had uneven frets. And it seemed already at that stage I could be fairly confident in saying that, because 100% of the random sample of the ones I'd seen, which are kind of random insofar as I bought them from YouTube, and there was nothing connecting the people I bought them from, or even the brand or model of the guitar. So in that random sample, it was interesting enough to be able to say 100% of the guitars so far that I handled had uneven frets. And so I was obviously asking the question, why would that be? And given that taking care of those uneven frets made such a massive difference, even to new guitars, which I'd already had some experience then of doing it to some brand new guitars. You'd think the manufacturer or the retailer should have known better, but sure enough, I got to do it and improve them. One in particular was a friend's Chapman Mark II, Chapman ML2, and that was suffering intonation problems because the string action of the first fret was too high, and it also had a number of uneven frets too. I can't remember what the score was because I didn't write it down. So even then I was kind of asking myself why that is, and the best answer I had at the time was that I guess the business model didn't demand they spent the time and effort to level those frets, because there were still enough people who would buy the guitars anyway, as is proven in everyday in the business every day. People are just going out and buying them because they like the look of them and they believe they're going to get something that's playable. And so, somewhere in the business model it didn't make any sense to spend all the time, like I'm doing here, to make a set of frets absolutely level once you've manufactured the guitar and installed them. And to be fair, some guitars are more or less playable without doing this work. I've had a couple. I've got one in the house at the moment, the Ibanez S521 I got last weekend, I think it was, and that I haven't done that one yet, and that's playable. It's a nice guitar, but it is an absolute minority, and I can see that while it's playable, I can see that doing this work would improve it. So I'll make no mistake, there will be a time when I do that guitar and it will have a certain number of uneven frets. It'd be really interesting to see how many, but the action is also set quite high on it. But yeah, so the conclusion at the time was that it obviously takes time and focus and concentration to do this work, and there isn't a machine probably that can do it. Well, there isn't one can do it economically, and so it's one of those if it ain't broke, don't fix it problems. If people are still buying the guitars by the millions, then why reduce your profit margin by spending all that time trying to get this particular thing perfect, which heck nobody notices anyway, surely. And I have to say that, say, another 50 guitars onwards from there, and all 50 of those guitars are still having the same problems, not one single guitar with no uneven frets. That conclusion hasn't really changed. I've not seen anything to challenge that, which is very interesting, really. And you know, the fact there must be a market for well set up guitars, because I'm selling mine. So it just must be, from the manufacturer or the retailer's point of view, it must not be economical enough to go to all that trouble that I'm going to here. Or maybe it's worthwhile, but maybe people haven't discovered that it might give them a competitive edge. But then you might say, well, the size of the market that can tell the difference or knows what you're talking about is necessarily quite small. And I knew when I started this that the market I was really aiming at were probably mostly, I mean, to begin with, people of my age group, people who had had a lifetime of crappy, hard to play guitars and were willing to, were not only willing to get one or pay a little bit extra to get one that wasn't crappy, but also people that were looking for reassurance, to know, to have some idea of what was being done and why. And maybe it's you get to a certain age and you're tired of not knowing, and sort of, you know, when you give your guitar into the luthier and it comes out and you have to hope they did the thing they said, but do you know? Right, we're near the end of this 1970s K Les Paul Woolworth Special, made of finest British, I don't know, Japanese, Chinese, finest Taiwanese chipboard. I mean, that's what this laminate stuff is. It's a bit of chipboard with a thin veneer on it, in layer upon layer. That's all there is in this guitar. And if you look inside the electronics cavity, you can see the veneer on the exposed layer. The veneer has come off, revealing the chipboard underneath. It's really crappy construction, but it does what it's expected to do. Well, it will do when I've done this part of it. Yay, nearly there. You can hear there's quite a bit of reshaping to do on this end couple of frets for some reason. But we're getting there. And the final one. Okie dokie. 43 minutes in. Okay. That's a measure of the time it takes to do this. 43 minutes. And we're only on step 2 of 3. But I can assure you that we are 2/3 of the way to having a neck that now will play very well, and it will surprise you. Got a nice yellowed nut there, which I think we'll just go straight back on. Perhaps with just a quick clean under there with a file. Straighten it out. Okay, so without further ado, because it's too boring to do any furthers, let's get a couple of different grades of paper for the job we're about to do. So, stage 3 of this process is the sanding stroke polishing stage, and think about it, we've just spent a long time levelling the frets, but in levelling them we've also put a load of very, very hefty scratches onto the surface of the frets, and even though we've kind of filed some of that down a bit with the fret crowning tool we just did, at the very top of the frets there still is a lot of scratches, horizontal, longitudinal scratches I should say, that way, from this file here. And if we don't get rid of those tiny microscopic little scratches will ruin your playing experience. So this part of the process is critical, that we have to use 240 grit paper to get rid of all these scratches, and we have to keep on going with 240 grit until we're guaranteed that all of those scratches have been replaced by these much finer scratches. And to do that we've got to be rigorous, and we need to pay very close attention to it, look right up close and make sure that not a single one remains. If a single one remains, we add another layer of that treatment. When we're happy that there are no scratches, none of those scratches left but only these, then we move on and use finer paper, in this case 600, to remove those scratches. And once we've done that, we then can move on to a set of micromesh papers, which runs from about 1500 grit through to 12,000, which is so fine that it's practically, well, it is polishing by the time we get there. So this is part 3 of this process, and it's also kind of boring, but it's rewarding. But because it's boring, the temptation is always going to be to rush it, which we can't afford to do. So I'm going to use 2 things for this job. One of them is going to be my hands or my fingers, and the other one is going to be a foam block a bit later on. But first of all I'm going to start with 240, and I'm just going to go over it, let my fingers bounce up and down over the frets. The reason I want to do that is because I want the fingers to travel up and over and down the side of the frets rather than scrape over the top and make a flat surface, a flat spot. Okay, so, and the thing to remember is that this paper is removing metal, and on its own you could very easily use this to level any high spots that you have. So this is very powerful abrasive, and what you have to remember to do is to, because it's taking metal off, is to do the same amount all over the neck. So long as you treat all the neck equally, then the amount it goes down will be pretty much the same all round, and therefore you won't create any new uneven frets or flat spots. So one of the things I was thinking of the other day is, now that I've got so many videos of different people's guitars, or guitars that I was selling that have since been bought, it might be a good idea to do some more generic and shorter ones for particular jobs. Although in a way, I'm not sure if there's any point, because there's so many people out there who do that anyway. There's no shortage of good information. That's not what the world needs, more information. And actually some of the people who've commented on these videos have specifically commented on the fact that although it's long-winded and potentially boring, they also like the pace of and the detail and the real-time pace of doing this, because they can be sure they haven't missed any part of it. And there's something about watching it, including the mistakes, that helps you figure out what has to happen, which is somehow better than an ideal quick 5-minute tutorial. Because the truth is about YouTube these days is that time is not time and space, storage space, not really a premium anymore. You can pretty much have as much as you want. I mean, okay, there are limits, and I'm about a third of the way through mine, but you know, it's plenty of space. So there isn't what I'm saying is not a real pressure forcing me to cut these short. Okay, so I'm nearing the end of 2 sheets of 240. As you can see, doing all of the frets equally. And it's this point now that I want to do a check in as good light as I can possibly do. Sorry if you're being dazzled. And here I just need to check the entire, help if it wasn't steamed up, do the entire neck and check every single fret really carefully. And we're looking for these tiny little potholes that will be a giveaway, or telltale, and show us that there are still scratches from the fret leveling file, and that's what we've got to watch out for. And if we see them, we've got to keep going with the same grade of paper, because if we don't, they'll just turn into scratches. The danger is you won't see them unless you look at it this closely. And if you don't see them right now, this looks pretty well done, and you'd sort of go ahead. You go ahead and you'll polish those scratches into the finished thing, and you won't see them until, or you won't notice them until you've restrung the guitar and put your expensive strings on it, and then you go to bend a note and it's horrible, it's crunchy. Now in my experience it's usually down this end. Yep, there's a couple, I can see some right on the end. It's hard to apply equal pressure to these down this end, but there are some, and so I'm going to carry on for another complete sheet of 240, because that's what the routine says. It's quite a dirty process, this. A lot of dust that comes off eventually. Now I'm just going to use the edge of this block for a little bit, see if I can kind of dig into those frets a bit more. Right, okay, so I'm going to be happy that that's done, and now the time is to switch to, I'd say 2, in fact 3 is a good idea, 3 of these, same process, and now we're taking the 240 marks away, replacing them with these 600 grit scratches, which are much finer. This is the sort of downhill bit now, really. The hard bit is that first grade of paper, and this is the home straight. I wonder if those tuners that came with this guitar really are as bad as they look. I don't think it's automatically the case. I mean, I know they look horrible and they look like a cheap classical guitar tuner. And I know that a good 18:1 gauge tuner feels wonderful and takes this kind of winds the string in very evenly and sort of measured manner. And the worst thing about a cheap tuner is when it sort of sticks and lurches forward and kind of grinds forward and jumps forward and pops and bangs. And so let's see what this comes out like. Who knows, we might even add some grease to the tuners, see if that improves it. Okay, so coming to the end of the final 600 grit piece, and now it's time to go to the micro mesh set. I'm going to just run through the whole range of papers, chucking all this away. We'll go through the whole range of micro mesh papers, and then when we're done we can do the unveil and we're ready to move this guitar onto the next stage. Well, at this point we're going from 600 to 1500 is the jump, so I recommend taking as much or more time if the jump is bigger. So an extra minute or so on this. You know, and treating this fretboard like it's a quality instrument, there's no reason why not to. There's no reason why it won't play very well after all of this. Part of the motivation, I think, was to take this on the surface hideous looking old thing and just make it play as well as it possibly can, and perhaps better than it should by looking at it. I've got every faith that that's possible. Okay, so going through the series now, 2400. Hoping that in the meantime, we're about an hour into doing this, so the frets on the Fender Music Master should now, or the one fret that I replaced, should, with luck, be done. And then I shall cut that and probably manually file the fret ends, and then do all the fret ends, just round them off a little bit so that they're no longer sharp, and then it will be into a full fret leveling process on that neck, which will be really exciting to see that come back out. We're ready to fight for another 40 years or something. Okay, so we are very much in polishing mode now. About to move on to 6000 grit. As I said, it's about This has taken about an hour just to do this. $8,000. Hooray. And 12. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the fret polishing. So there are our 3 stages. Took just about an hour. Fret leveling, fret reprofiling, and finally fret polishing. All of which leave us with a lovely leveled fretboard, beyond what you'd expect, or ever would have expected as a kid when you played your mate's K guitar from Woolies. You know, the one that was stacked next to the Bontempi organ. I think my mate Paul at school, we were in a band together, and I think Paul had a Bontempi organ. And our first ever gig, I remember him playing it. Lived in his house most of the time. We played this gig in his front room. And if I remember, the songs we played were Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles. Wow. So I'd love to play that now. We played Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles, and we played And I Love Her by the Beatles. Badly. Oh, I did badly. My God, I can hear the sound of my satellite in my mind as I remember that. Yes, and we played Julia Dream by Pink Floyd, funnily enough, an obscure Pink Floyd track, and an instrumental written by Paul himself, featuring a kind of solo on his Bontempi organ. I can even remember it. And I remember Steve Gregory, our bass player. Steve, if you ever watch this, hello mate. Been far too many years since we spoke, but Steve played bass, and I remember on the audio cassette that we had of this gig in the front room, I remember Steve plonking out this dreadfully out of tune bass line, and Paul playing these wibbly Bontempi keyboards in the background, and me sort of strangulated tones singing, trying to sing And I Love Her. Oh dear, those were the days. Right, so a quick bit of a rub down at the end of that process. And there, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you what is now, for the first time in its life, a levelled fretboard, which has still got some life left in it, which is brilliant. A levelled fretboard on a K guitar. You'll never have seen this in your born days. Nobody you knew or have ever known would spend whatever it would cost them at some other luthier to do this, maybe 110 quid or something to level the frets on this monster. Nobody would have spent that money. So I can confidently say this is one of the few K guitars, probably in the known universe, that has had this done to it, which makes it a true original rarity. Worth millions, I expect. Only trouble is it's not going to be for sale, because the idea I had was that this is going to be the Real Love Guitars demonstrator, because I'll be able to go travelling around places and say to people, you remember with that lousy guitar you had as a kid, that disgusting K Les Paul copy, and they go, oh god, yeah, oh well, here's one, grab hold of that. I'm not going to use that one, I'm going to use some of that. Now, what does viscosity mean? Thickness or runniness? I think it means this is supposed to be runny. I don't want highly viscous, I want runny stuff. I think I've kind of made a right cock up there, still. Okay, I'm just going to shove that fella back on there for a minute. Yes, high viscosity. That's me thinking that meant it was very runny. I think I've got it wrong. You'll find it means highly viscous is very thick. Right, anyway, so just as a finishing touch for our now beautiful, regal Les Paul copy, I'm going to chuck on some lemon oil just to bring out the warmth of this beautiful fingerboard, which is still giving up some grime, by the way, but yeah, look at it. That's a beautiful colour fingerboard. It's got a nice binding that's gone proper old vintagey colour with age. Nice yellow, orangey, creamy, you know, gone off colour. It's got two tones to it, this has a sort of lighter stripe down the side. Still one piece of rosewood. Right, so there's our freshly polished guitar neck, ready for whenever we feel in the mood to reconstitute the thing. A bit of component cleaning to do, but that's nice. Kind of pleased with that. It actually looks like you'd want to pick it up and play it, unlike that horrible, scummy lump that I had when I first got it. Is that a K neck I see before me? No, it looks way too good. Nice. Right, I'm going to hang this up, and then I'm going to take out the final fret and switch. I guess I have to switch videos at this point, otherwise it won't make sense. So see you in a minute.